Have you ever thought to yourself, I could do this better? Well, today I've got my list of the things that I would change about Royal Caribbean if I could, up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. If you're like me, when you're on a cruise, you see some things that are happening and think to yourself, I wish they would change this, or I wish they would do that. And certainly being at home, I daydream about those kind of things because, yes, I am a cruise nerd, but also because I think it's kind of interesting to think about, the ways that, of course, our favorite cruise line could do better. I think it's safe to say that any company can always do better. There's always room for improvement. And I think when it comes to Royal Caribbean, there are definitely some ways that I've observed over the years that I think I would change if I was in charge. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to make cruises free or giveaways or really the kind of things that real deeply impact Royal Caribbean's bottom line. I'm trying to be a little practical about this. So I'm purely looking at this from the guest experience, meaning I'm trying to think of ways that I think guests, one myself here, would benefit and enjoy a better overall cruise experience by making some of these changes. These are kind of the things that I think I've heard from a lot of other people, and I've observed in my own experience that should or could or both be changed and be an improvement for overall Royal Caribbean. So I've got my list. Let's jump right into it. Starting off with number one, enforce the dress code. So I've often talked about the fact that if you go on a Royal Caribbean cruise and you go to the main dining room, there are dress codes. And these dress codes are largely suggestive. They're not really enforced at all anymore. And I've always said that I think Royal Caribbean should either drop them completely or enforce the dress codes. But since I'm in charge, I'm going to decide they should enforce the dress codes. I'm not here to say that we should all dress like it's 1920 or it's your senior prom or anything like that. I don't think we need to go back to the days of wearing tuxedos and ball gowns everywhere we went. I will say that I think the dress codes that are on paper are totally fine the way they're written. I think that it makes a lot of sense. I would probably iron out, no pun intended, the idea of some of these exceptions and whether or not things like shorts are allowed in the main dining room or not. Basically, just make this really crystal clear as to what you should or should not be wearing to dinner, whether it is a formal night or casual night. And then I would actually enforce them. Yes, I would have crew members at the entrance enforcing the dress code. Now, again, we're not here to say, okay, well, ma'am, your dress is not exactly the type of dress we envisioned. No, that's not that kind of fashion police. What we're talking about is people who come to the main dining room wearing bathing suits, wearing cover-ups, wearing athletic clothing that's really meant for the pool deck area. This is simply about the dress code that is written down, that we all see there, and to actually enforce the rules. It's out of respect to everybody else in the dining room following the rules. And if we're going to have a dress code, and I'm saying we should have a dress code, and nothing too crazy, just what's on paper there. And if you've been to a Royal Caribbean dining room in the past, then you know that it's nothing over the top, and even on formal night, it's not really that formal if you read through the requirements that are there. I just think that overall, if you're going to have the policy, it should be enforced. And if people show up not following it, a simple, I'm sorry, madam or sir, we have a dress code here. If you'd like to, you're more than welcome to return to your cabin, change, and come on back. We'll have your table waiting for you, and you can join us for dinner there. Otherwise, no worries at all if you don't want to. There are a lot of great alternative restaurants, whether it is the Windjammer Buffet, whether it is Sorrento's, whether it's Cafe Promenade, El Loco Fresh, lots of good choices that are out there. So I would say, number one, enforce the dress codes. Number two, I would add a sandwich shop restaurant on Royal Caribbean. If there's one type of food Royal Caribbean really does not do well, it's sandwiches. I mean, you can get sandwiches from like Cafe Promenade or Cafe Latitudes or Cafe 270, depending on which Royal Caribbean ship you're on. But I'm talking about a good sub sandwich, a good hero, a good grinder, wherever you're from in the U.S. or wherever we call it. It is a good sandwich. It is made from fresh bread, which, by the way, is something the Royal Caribbean I really think struggles with. Like, their breads are not fantastic when it comes to the fresh variety. I mean, it smells all good, don't get me wrong, and I love a good dinner roll as much as the next person, but to actually get a pita bread, to get a sub roll, it just seems like that bread just, anyway, that's another wish for another day. But I think that you'd have a great sandwich, custom ordered, whether you're talking about a Jersey Mike style sandwich or a Subway or whatever your favorite sandwich shop is. I think there really is a good need for this kind of a food. It's an easy one to assemble. The cost is relatively low. We're not investing in some high grade food here. We're talking about what I think is a crowd pleaser type of food that is great for the pool deck, great to bring back to your room or anywhere else on the ship. I really think a sandwich shop would be wonderful. You know, when I first started cruising with Royal Caribbean, I remember on the Radiance class, they had a cafe that served these type of foods there, and I loved it. And of course, they got rid of that almost immediately, and then that was the end of that. But I would love to see a sandwich shop come back. I think this would be a real hit. Obviously, if we're making this about the people here and all, that's all of you watching, sure, I'd love for it to be complimentary. That's something I think that Carnival does better than Royal Caribbean, is offer more complimentary pool deck style food. And I really think a sandwich shop would really do well. And because there's not a high cost to it, this isn't like sushi, which, inherently has a higher cost to it. I think you could really make this a complimentary restaurant and be a big hit with cruise fans. So I'm going to say a sandwich shop as my number 2. Number 3, I would add more overnight stops to itineraries. I think Royal Caribbean does not do enough overnight cruises in which you remain in the cruise port overnight. Usually when you go to a cruise port, you get there sometime maybe in the morning and then leave sometime in the afternoon. But the overnight period is really a missed opportunity in a lot of these places, especially in the Caribbean, in which Royal Caribbean goes to the same ports over and over and over again. I think it would really add some nice variety to be able to spend an overnight in a place like Cozumel or perhaps St. Thomas, be able to see the sunset and enjoy the nightlife there. This is something that other cruise lines do, and I'm not sure why Royal Caribbean doesn't do that. I imagine there is a higher cost. After all, when a cruise ship visits a port, the amount of time you spend in the port dock there costs the cruise line money. It's kind of like parking your car at a parking meter. The longer you're there, the longer you pay. I get that. But I really think that this would be a benefit for both Royal Caribbean and the countries that they are visiting because, of course, guests are going to be off the ship and have more time to do more. So this is not only about the fact that you could go and enjoy things like the sunset or a club experience or going to dinner somewhere, but this also opens up so much more time for people to enjoy things to do. Have you ever been in Cozumel and thought to yourself, well, geez, I'd love to go to the mainland and do some of the Mayan ruins that are over there, but the amount of time required to travel back and forth, you only have like maybe an hour or so at the actual ruins. But if you're there overnight, all of a sudden, now you have a lot more time to get back and forth. So this is good for the guest satisfaction and for, of course, the places they're visiting. Well, people spending more time in port are going to be getting more opportunity to spend money there, which I think is what most of these ports want. So it seems like a win-win, and I would add more time, more overnights is definitely one thing. And while we're on the subject of ports, this isn't on my list, but I'm going to add this anyway. Can we please drop Caribbean visits that begin at like 7 a.m. and then the ship leaves at like 2 p.m.? None of the ports open until like 9 o'clock anyway, so the hours of 7 and 8 a.m. is completely lost, and then there's not enough time to do anything. So I would drop all those, and I'd add more overnights. I'd rather spend an overnight in one port than go to 2 ports and have really weird times there. So there you go. I'm off my soapbox now. Next up is a change I think Royal Caribbean should have done years and years and years ago, and that is to include gratuities as part of the cruise fare. I think the fact that gratuities are pretty much compulsory now in the sense that you're either automatic, as in every day of your cruise, you're assessed an automatic gratuity, or you prepay them. The fact is, it is part of the cruise fare. The fact that they don't make it part of the cruise fare is really a marketing ploy to make the overall cruise fare seem lower. But more importantly, I think the reason why gratuity should be part of the cruise fare is people really do think that they're optional and not obligatory. The crew members work very hard. They deserve that money. And I think Royal Caribbean should just make it part of the cruise fare and be done with this like, well, it's not really included, but it's included kind of a thing. Let's make it part of the cruise fare, a line item, just like it is your taxes and port fees, and be done with it. I think in 2022, there is no reason we shouldn't have the gratuities as part of the cruise fare because the crew members work so hard for it, and there are a lot of people who remove the gratuities because they think it's not their place to be doing that. I don't disagree with the idea that it shouldn't be part of the fare compensation that the crew members should be getting. That is why I think it should be part of the cruise fare, and that's that. And then you can really leave gratuities that are on top of that to be purely subjective, purely optional, and nobody feel like they're shortchanging the crew members by going on board a ship and not paying something extra. So part of the cruise fare, they already do this, by the way, in the Australia cruise market, because in Australia, it's not their custom to tip in the beginning. So Royal Caribbean was like, well, in order to not shortchange the crew members, we're going to include that as part of the fare, and I think that just makes sense from a global standpoint. So include the gratuities as part of the cruise fare. Next up, something that's a little self-serving, I admit it, but hey, you know what? I'm here, man of the people, and that is, I think there should be special lines in port, on gangways, even in guest services for higher members of Crown and Anchor Society. Now, I'm not trying to be an elitist here because I am a Diamond Plus member of Crown and Anchor Society. I'm really not about that, but I do think that it makes sense in situations like this to offer their top guests special access. You know, in Walt Disney World, as an example, when you go to the parks, there's actually a special line now to get into the park for annual pass holders. Not quite the same thing, but go with me on this idea. I think it makes sense to give the top tier cruisers a little benefit. This has like no additional cost to it. I mean, you got to have maybe an extra gangway there, but they've already got that, and they've got the crew members working it anyway. But help break up the line, make it seem like, okay, here you go. Here's a little benefit, something easy for being a top tier member. I'm not sure where I would draw the line. Like, would it be for gold and up? Would it be platinum and above? Diamond and above? That's someone else's decision to figure out. But I do think it makes sense to have special lines for the top members. I think the fact that at guest services, there should be a special line for diamond and above makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you go to almost any hotel now, the customer loyalty program usually has a special line just for them. And you can make the argument, well, you go to the Diamond Lounge and also get that kind of assistance from the Diamond host there. This is true, except the Diamond host is not there all the time. Guest services is there all the time. So I would put that. So I said earlier in this video that I wouldn't be talking about things or touching things really that relate to revenue. But there is one that I think needs to be changed because, number one, I don't think it makes them any money or really much money at all. But that is to include the chat feature in the Royal Caribbean app for free, or at least part of your package if you buy an internet package on board. I really don't understand why this costs extra. The fact is that if you buy an internet package, a Voom internet package for the duration of your cruise, the Royal Caribbean chat feature should be included. I think it's crazy that it's not. I never understood why it wasn't. A lot of other cruise lines out there include the chat feature for free as part of their app. I think it only serves to benefit Royal Caribbean. It's better guest experience, makes everything a little bit better, easier for families especially. I just don't understand the logic of it because, number one, I am willing to bet not many people buy that feature. It costs $1.99 per person per day. I think a lot of people balk at that. In fact, I just can't even think of the last person I saw who was actively using it, and I think it's silly, and I think it should be included as part of the cruise fare. I get it. This is more money out of Royal Caribbean's pocket, whether it is $20 or $20,000. It's a fair point. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's a minor note in their balance sheet, and I would say make the chat feature free or at least included with the internet package, and that's a win-win for everybody. And lastly, I really thought about this one for a while because I've heard about this from a lot of other cruisers out there, and I think there is some truth to this. And I think, again, in 2022, keeping in mind there's a bit of a lag factor to get this done, but I think it is time for Royal Caribbean to build a new class of cruise ship to replace the Vision class and maybe even the Radiance class ship. So, as we all know, Royal Caribbean is building bigger and bigger ships. Icon of the Seas is coming out in 2024, and she's going to be the biggest cruise ship in the world. And Utopia of the Seas, another Oasis class ship, coming out later that year. And it's also going to be a massive new ship, and we've got more Icon class ships, and bigger ships are amazing, and I love the big ships. But I think given the age of the Vision class especially, they're really like, 30 years old or so, or even more, it's time to replace the smaller ships. Now, Royal Caribbean has generally not done that in the sense that they've been building bigger ships, and they haven't said it, but basically the idea is if you want a smaller ship experience that's new, you should probably be going on sister brands like Celebrity or Silver Sea. I think that idea made a lot of sense when the Vision and the Radiance class ships were more like 20 years old, but as they're getting older and older, and given the fact that even if I ordered a new cruise ship today, it's going to take like 3 or 4 years at least for it to actually be built and delivered, it is time to start thinking about that and to replace the older ships in the fleet. I'm not saying they need to build 20 new smaller ships out there, but I do think, whether it is 3 or 5 of these 2,000 to 2,500 passenger vessels would make a lot of sense. Number one, a new ship is always going to be more cost effective than an existing ship because they have a lot more efficiencies built into them that weren't there in, again, 20, 30 years ago. Number two, while Royal Caribbean could probably still make money with all their big ships out there, there are markets that are going to need to have those smaller ships. And I think there is a need for it. Again, this isn't to say that Royal Caribbean needs to build a giant fleet of small ships. I know there's probably some fans out there who would love to see that, but I do think there is still a need for them, especially over the next decade or two. I just don't think that we're ready to move on as a world to just these massive cruise ships. Not to say that a 2,000 passenger vessel isn't big, but I think there's still a market need for it. And I think Royal Caribbean could serve that just in the same way. Car manufacturers may specialize in a particular type of model, like an SUV or a pickup truck, but still make sedans or vice versa, or economic small cars, luxury cars, right? It's not necessarily their bread and butter, but it's part of their overall plan. And I think Royal Caribbean can certainly benefit from that. There you go. There's my top things that I would change. I'm sure there's more as soon as I post this video. I'll think, I should have done that one. In fact, let me know in the comments below. What would you change about Royal Caribbean? Keeping in mind, let's be realistic about this. We're not going to say, hey, free cruises for everybody, reduce cruise fares, expand the ships like 80%. I mean, you got to be kind of some realistic about this. But I can't wait to read your thoughts in the comments below. While you're down there below the video, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, YouTube lets you know we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. We'll talk again real soon.